Hello and good morning. Welcome to our special coverage of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. I'm Ladi Akiri-Gulwale. The headlines. IAEA mission sets off to Ukrainian nuclear power plant as shells drop nearby. Sister raises funds to bring British medic killed while volunteering in Ukraine home. And Moscow promises retaliation over Brussels' decision to suspend an agreement that allows Russian citizens to apply for EU visas. Happy New Month. Let's begin with a recap of notable attacks that happened in the course of this week. Russian forces destroyed large numbers of Ukraine's command posts and ammunition depots and intercepted over 50 rocket projectiles from Ukraine, while Ukraine claims its forces launched counteroffensives on the southern front line. Russian Defense Ministry spokesperson Igor Konashenkov said at the daily briefing that Russian forces destroyed 10 Ukrainian command posts and 2 ammunition depots in Kherson, Demilitarizing, and Donetsk regions. A total of 7 drones of Ukraine were shot down, according to that report. In addition, 57 projectiles, including multiple launch rocket systems, were also intercepted, and an attempt by Ukrainian forces to resume the offensive in Nikolaev Krivov Rog was thwarted in previous 2 days, and that's according to General Konashenkov. Ukraine also suffered severe losses when attacking residential sites in Kherson, Vinnytsia, and Nikolaev regions, according to the same report. Leaders of the Donetsk region said a batch of missiles for high-mobility artillery rocket systems, HIMARS, with a firing range of 300 kilometers had arrived in Ukraine, and the local military forces and Russian army were planning to destroy the missiles. Mikhailo Podolyak, advisor to the head of the office of the president of Ukraine, had said that the Ukrainian forces had launched counteroffensives in southern Kherson, Melitopol, and eastern Kharkov, and the Ukrainian forces' counteroffensive in Donetsk-Luhansk direction was more active. And Russian President Vladimir Putin says Mikhail Gorbachev, the last leader of the Soviet Union and architect of perestroika and glasnost, governed the erstwhile state through dramatic and challenging times. Mr. Gorbachev passed away at the age of 91 on Tuesday. In his condolence letter to Mr. Gorbachev's family, Mr. Putin says Mikhail Gorbachev was a politician and statesman who made a profound impact on the course of world history. After becoming the leader of the Soviet Union in 1985, Mr. Gorbachev launched sweeping reforms aimed at liberalization of the economy and public life. His tenure saw the fall of the Berlin Wall and the end of the Cold War. He resigned at the end of 1991 with the breakup of the Soviet Union and was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1990. New Pentagon Press Secretary Pat Ryder has asked Russia to let a team of the International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA, inspect the nuclear power plant in Zaporizhzhia, Ukraine. During his first on-camera press briefing, Mr. Ryder said the U.S. Defense Department is aware of sporadic shelling in the region and asked Russia and Ukraine to ensure the safety of the power plant.
As you know, in terms of the power plant, as has been said by others, we certainly welcome, first and foremost, the IAEA's presence in the region. And to my knowledge, I know that they are in the vicinity of the plant. I do not know whether or not they have embarked for or arrived at the plant yet. In terms of the fighting in the region, again, to the best of our knowledge, we do continue to see sporadic shelling in the region, and we call on all sides to ensure the safety of the power plant for obvious reasons, and would also call on Russia to enable the IAEA team to be able to get in there and do their work. We will continue to maintain an open dialogue as early as next week again in terms of what Ukrainian needs are in the fight. In regards to fighting in Ukraine, what I would tell you is that we are very sensitive to not getting ahead of the Ukrainians. I think you've heard some of their public statements, not the least of which is their president, talking about the need for operations security. And so certainly from this podium, I'm not going to talk about tactical level battlefield detail. What I will say is that we are aware of Ukrainian military operations that have made some forward movement, and in some cases in the Kherson region, we are aware in some cases of Russian units falling back.
And in spite of reports of intense shelling, the International Atomic Energy Agency mission has set off for the Ukrainian city of Zaporizhzhia towards the nuclear power plant in the Russian-controlled town of Anahoda today. The IAEA chief, Rafael Grossi, said the mission was aware of the high risk of increased military activity in the area between Ukrainian and Russian defense lines posed, but was pressing ahead with its plan to visit the facility and meet with its staff.
We are aware of the current situation. There has been increased military activity, including this morning. Until very recently, a few minutes ago, I have been briefed by the Ukrainian regional military commander here about that and the inherent risks. But weighing the pros and cons, and having come so far, we are not stopping. We are moving now. We know that there is an area, as you know, the so-called gray zone, where the last line of the Ukrainian defense comes, and before the first line of the Russian occupying forces begin, where the risks are significant. At the same time, we consider that we have the minimum conditions to move, accepting that the risks are very, very high. Still, myself and the team, we believe that we can proceed with this. We have a very important mission to accomplish. As you know, we are going to start immediately an assessment of the security and the safety situation at the plant as it is right now. We are going to be liaising and consulting with the staff at the facility. And I am going to consider the possibility of establishing a continued presence of the IAEA at the plant, which we believe it's indispensable to stabilize the situation and to get regular, reliable, impartial, neutral updates of what the situation is there. So wish us luck. We are moving now. Thank you for your interest. It's very important that the world knows what's happening here.
Meanwhile, Ukraine's energy minister, German Galushenko, says the IAEA mission to the Russian-held Zaporizhzhia plant was a step towards deoccupying and demilitarizing the site. Speaking in Ukrainian-controlled parts of Zaporizhzhia, he said Mr. Galushenko also said it was crucial for the mission headed by Rafael Grossi to be allowed to speak to staff at the site.
Step to deoccupy, demilitarize the station, because that is really very important. Also, very important goal is from our views is that the mission could speak to the personnel, to the staff, could get the real information, not Russian information, but get the real information what is inside. First of all, but what is really very important that we need to check the situation on the NPP, because we have now the soldiers there, we have the heavy vehicles there, so we need to check what is really from the point of view of nuclear safety and security. That's the first goal.
Let's talk now to Tom Rosett, who is Associate Professor in Intelligence Studies and the head of the Ukraine program at the Norwegian Defence University College. He joins us virtually from Oslo in Norway. Good morning to you, Professor Rosett. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for inviting me.
Let's begin with what we've been reporting, this IAEA mission that is now on its way to Zaporizhia, in spite of all the conflict that's been going on around the plant itself. If we put aside the possibility of danger for the team itself and look at what they are possibly going to find at this plant, do you think, as indeed the Ukrainian Minister of Energy there pointed out, that this could be the first step in restoring some kind of order to the plant there by demilitarizing it and knowing exactly what is going on in there to assuage safety concerns?
I think it's of utmost important to have an objective team coming in and assessing the situation. And yes, I think that will be finally an easing of the situation that has been escalating for over some time, with the danger of some damage to the nuclear power plant and possibly a catastrophe on the ground there. But this is a step in the right direction, and demilitarization, well, that's difficult because the Russian side is sternly opposing that. But it's good to have a team on the ground there that will hopefully calm the parts, and there will be less shelling on and around the power plant.
Yes, you do mention that when you say that you hope that there will be less shelling. I mean, what we've witnessed during the course of this conflict is that there has been shelling, no doubt. Nobody is disputing that. What is in dispute is who is doing the shelling. Now, I don't want to play the devil's advocate, but were there to be such an incident while the IAEA team is in Zaporizhia, this conflict would take a completely different turn, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that would be yet another escalation and a very severe situation. And who's doing the shelling? I mean, there's Russian forces in and around the compound doing shelling towards the north over the Dnieper River to Nikopol. And there's also Ukrainian shelling around the power plant, trying to take out Russian military forces that have positioned themselves there. And there's additionally Russian shelling towards parts of the area around and possibly also towards the power plant, as reported yesterday. With the residential area around the power plant and at Udar, where the people that work at the plant live, had been shelled, and there was a fire there.
Let's look at some of the other things that have come out of this, shall we? When this conflict started 6 months ago, nobody thought it would be still going on at this time. Certainly not the Russians, certainly not the Ukrainians, certainly not the Europeans or the Americans or the Chinese or the Russians, but it is. Now, you are in Oslo. Norway has, of course, been one of the countries that has been drawn in, if I may use that phrase, into this crisis nilly-willy, and it has had to shore up its defenses, shall we say. Now, 6 months down the line, what do you think the effect of this conflict will be on the Norwegian psyche in terms of how prepared they are for the kind of eventualities that perhaps 6 months ago was not on anybody's mind?
This war has changed the security situation in Europe in a severe way. We are embraced for a challenging situation with Russia over time. This is not a short-term war, it's a long-term war. And no matter how the war ends, the relationship between Europe and Norway with Russia will be altered for the foreseeable future. Yes, we have increased Russian activities up north. We have a common border with Russia. It's a stable situation there, but and Russia is using all its resources on Ukraine for the moment. But if Russia sort of wins this war in a way, or gains time to rebuild their forces and rest, and let's say in 10 years time they have possibly new ambitions. So yeah, we're embracing ourselves for a more confrontational situation with Russia, also bilaterally between our two countries. But again, I mean, our bilateral situation with Russia is fairly calm and stable, at least in the short and medium term.
The events that are unfolding today, I don't know whether you want to say it's ironic or it's coincidental. The man who set it all off died on Tuesday. I'm talking about Mikhail Gorbachev, the leader of the then Soviet Union. Perhaps his death gave an opportunity again to take a look at those heady times, which, if had been more properly set out and the results had been more organized, perhaps we wouldn't have gone down this road. What do you think his legacy will be now? Because many people in today's world were not around during those heady times. The large population of the world were youth, many of them under 25, and we're talking of 1991. So, and the run up to 1991, Ukraine used to be part of the Soviet Union, Lithuania, the Baltic states, and the relationship was completely different. What do you think his legacy will be, especially now that two former Soviet republics have engaged in conflict?
Well, his legacy will to Gorbachev will be different depending on where you sit in Russia. Putin has repeatedly said that the dissolvement of the Soviet Union is the worst thing that had happened in modern history in Russia, while in the West and other places, this is the fall of the Soviet Union or the perestroika and the things that Gorbachev did open up society and modernize the Soviet Union was seen as something very positive. So it's a very different view on it. And what Putin is currently doing is trying to reestablish much of what was the Soviet Union. And certainly Russia sees itself as the big power that are inherited to take up its responsibility and steer sort of the other post-Soviet states in its direction, and it's in an Eurasian direction. So whilst the West see it very otherwise, so it's a very diverse legacy, and it's more popular in the West than in Russia for sure at the moment.
Indeed, it is more popular in the West than in Russia, although the Russians were, the Russian authorities were quite cordial in their description of him following his death. But as you pointed out, the current authorities think that he presided over the biggest mistake at that time. But finally, did you think that his actions altered the balance of power in Europe and removed what many had referred to as the bipolar world, and it became unipolar, which led to other countries wanting to join the EU, and then later on other countries wanting to establish an alternative worldview?
Yeah, that's a fairly good description, I would say. I mean, the fall of the Soviet Union created a unipolar world. We're seeing now a rise in maybe not a multipolar world, but a bipolar where China and the US are the two great powers. And I think Russia is perhaps not that strong, especially economically, to compete in that superpower sphere as China and the United States. So we will see a rising China that will influence world politics in a greater extent, but Russia is very keen on trying to emphasize the fall of the West, and that's premature. The West is strong, and the US is still a very capable power. So, sort of the fall of the West is something that I think is very exaggerated. But it's a different situation. It's no longer a unipolar war. Yes.
Absolutely. Professor Tom Rosett, thank you so very much for your time and for your views this morning. Professor Rosett, of course, is the head of the Ukraine program at the Norwegian Defense College in Oslo. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Still to come on the program, German regulatory chief Klaus Muller says his country is now better prepared for Nord Stream 1 outages. They stay on with us. Thanks for staying tuned. Welcome back to the program. The administrative building in Ukraine's Enerhoda, a town hosting the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, has been damaged after shelling struck the area. The town and the power plant have been under the control of Russian forces since early March, but in recent weeks, both of them have traded blames for attacks on the town and the nearby nuclear power complex, Europe's largest such facility. And the United States believes that Russia is facing severe shortages of military personnel in Ukraine and is seeking new ways to increase its troop levels. The latest U.S. assessment is based on downgraded intelligence and confirmed by two U.S. officials. It is the latest effort by the Joe Biden administration to downgrade and publicly release intelligence findings about Russia's war efforts. The officials also said that the U.S. has credible reporting that Russia's defense ministry is likely to begin recruiting convicted criminals in Ukraine in exchange for pardons and financial compensation. As with previous releases of downgraded intelligence, the officials did not provide additional details about the intelligence behind these assessments. And a British man, Craig McIntosh, has been killed while volunteering as a medic in Ukraine, and that's according to his sister, Lorna McIntosh. She says he died in the line of duty on the 24th of August. Ms. McIntosh has raised more than £5,000 on a GoFundMe page to bring her brother's body back to the United Kingdom, asking that please help us bring this war hero home. The Foreign Office said it was supporting the family. Writing on the fundraising page, Ms. McIntosh said, quote, "Our brother bravely volunteered to go to Ukraine as a medic to help save lives in this war-torn country." She said it would cost around £4,000 to return the body to the United Kingdom. And Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Alexander Grushko says Moscow will retaliate for the European Union's decision to fully suspend an agreement that allowed Russian citizens to apply for EU visas under a simplified procedure. He adds that Russia reserves its right to take any necessary retaliatory steps should they be symmetric, asymmetric, or some others that the European Union would not expect, suggesting that the visa decision will ultimately do the bloc more harm than good. Earlier in the day, the EU foreign ministers had agreed to fully suspend the visa facilitation agreement with Russia. In announcing the decision, EU top diplomat Joseph Borrell said the move would significantly reduce the number of new visas issued by EU member states to Russian nationals. And Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock says even if Germans take to the streets over energy prices, Berlin must support Ukraine by maintaining sanctions on Russia. Speaking at a news conference in Prague, she says, "If I give the promise to the people in Ukraine, we stand with you as long as you need us, then I want to deliver, no matter what my German voters think, but I want to deliver to the people of Ukraine." Ms. Baerbock's fellow Green Party member, Robert Habeck, the Economy and Climate Change Minister, says these social measures may include subsidies, a changed market structure for energy, and a budget that would shift the burden for electricity prices from the citizens, as well as price caps. Ukrainian officials in the eastern Zaporizhzhia region are being investigated for allegedly stealing massive amounts of humanitarian aid sent to them. They're also accused of looting hundreds of freight cars worth of goods. Raids at offices and addresses associated with the suspected embezzlers have been reported as well. Agents of the SBU, Ukraine's successor to the KGB, and the anti-corruption agency NABU conducted the operations, according to a statement from both agencies. The region is mostly controlled by Russian forces, but its capital and some of the surrounding areas are under Kiev's control. The raids targeted the Kiev-appointed administration and members of the city council. The agencies also reported confiscating what they believe to be narcotics and illegal firearms while searching the premises. A Russian S-300 rocket hit a residential area in Kramatorsk, damaging at least 9 apartment blocks and smashing around 300 windows, but causing no deaths or injuries. According to the town's mayor, Ukraine aims to evacuate 2/3 of residents from areas it controls in the eastern battleground region of Donetsk, as well as other frontline areas before winter. Authorities describe the evacuation as mandatory, but residents can opt out by filling in a form declaring their intention to stay. Russia has repeatedly denied targeting civilian areas after launching what it calls the special military operation in February, in spite of mounting evidence that its missiles have repeatedly hit residential areas across the country. And a rocket or missile fired from near the Russian city of Belgorod appears to have gone off course and crashed into a residential area, according to multiple social videos uploaded to the Telegram channel Belgorod Informant yesterday. It's unclear how much damage it caused or whether there were any casualties, but the videos show the projectiles flying in a shallow arc across the city before coming down somewhere close by. Residents posted on Telegram that it had hit the Komsomolsky district. However, there's been no comment from local officials. And let's talk now to our business correspondent, as we do every time at this time on the program. Morning, Nini.
Good morning.
Let's take a look, shall we, at some of the things. The Russian gas giant Gazprom shares have gone up more than 30%. No surprises there.
Yes.
And its board is recommending paying dividends. So this is...
I wonder why you're smiling. Are you an investor in Gazprom?
If I were, I wouldn't tell you, would I? This looks like the reward for everything you've been reporting since February.
Yes, well, as we have been saying, we've seen a lot of friends of Russia that have sustained the momentum, increased their demand, China, India, and then the indirect or secondary sale to the unfriendly countries that is becoming popular now, because I've seen another report on that China may be selling some of the Russian gas to Europe.
Okay, well, that's an interesting engineering.
Very interesting, because because I think one of the motivation for that investigation was that China has been demanding and importing more than 60% in the first 6 months of this year, more than 60% of what they normally will get from Russia. Where are they? Where are they keeping it? What are they using it for? And we do know that there's been a lot of lockdown in the last couple of months in the Asian countries because of COVID-19.
Absolutely.
So that means that manufacturing and a lot of industrial activities have dwindled. So where are they using the energy? So there are some investigations that say that it looks like China is doing a secondary sale to some European country. Very complicated. But I mean, let's remember that in June, Gazprom was not able to pay dividend. Remember, in June, they were supposed to pay. So their share price dropped by 30%. So this is like a compensation. Now they're back, they are paying the dividends, and it's looking good for Gazprom at this time. But of course, we cannot say that it's totally good because...
Well, would you say this, of course, is keeping in line with... We reported earlier, I think that would be in July or so, the mega profits that Shell and the
Yes.
others oil companies,
Yeah,
Saudi Aramco and go are reporting.
Yeah, but you know, those guys are not on the sanction. They are on the sanction. So that's why they had that problem they had in June.
Right.
So this is like a recovery for them. You know, at least they've gotten back to that level because they have a lot of quiet customers,
Yes,
you know,
who don't want to be publicly
Taliban
identified.
and Afghanistan and all
Yeah.
of that, you know. So it's good for especially investors. They're going to get a lot of money at this time.
About 1 trillion rubles.
Yes. No, they said that the day before they made a record 2.5 trillion rubles in net profit. So that's about $41.36 billion.
That's a lot of money.
That's a lot
for shareholders.
of money.
No wonder I'm smiling. Russian rail sector moves towards recession this year. So on one hand, good news, on the other, not so good.
Yeah, so we do know that, in fact, I think yesterday or 2 days ago, Russia, they launched a new economic plan, obviously taking into consideration their new realities, which is the sanctions and all of that. Find their oil is doing well, oil and gas is doing well, still in high demand. But we remember that when it comes to transportation, because one of the areas they want to focus on in that economic plan is transportation, because they have seen and they know that that area has really suffered because it used to be heavily dependent on the Western world. So we talked about their aircraft. You know, they see some of those fleets. Maintaining it is another issue. Then they have their domestically produced lander.
Right.
You know, of course, maintaining it is also another story. But I think one area that they have not been able to even touch at all is the rail, because it used to be very active, because Russia is a very heavily
vast.
Yeah, and heavily exports dependent country. And you know, unlike
rail was the method of moving goods.
Moving it and moving mostly to European countries and the West.
Right.
So that means that even though they are friends with China now, there's no infrastructure to connect the rail to that. So if they want to start doing that, then it will cost a lot. So about more than 7,000 of their motors in the rail are idle, have been idle for a couple of months now because they cannot move, that they don't have those places to go to. And then the areas, which is like China and India that they are friends with, there's no connection via rail. So that's why that sector is nearing recession. And it's also a major focus for them in their new economic plan, to say that I think in the next 3 to 5 years, they want to put a lot of domestic attention there, maybe make some parts that they can use, get the skills to maintain it, and then connect it to countries like China and India so that it will be busy working in that area.
The graph is zigzag, because now we talked about Gazprom, good. We've talked about rail now, not so good. But activity in the manufacturing sector, as you've just been reporting, because they've had to look inwards.
Yes, exactly.
The activity has surged.
Yeah, the PMI. So that's the first time. This is the first time they're recording a positive since the war started. And just as you said, it's driven by domestic demand. So Russians who are inside, I mean, honestly, I do wish that these are some of the lessons we should learn. So Russia is under sanction, and then you see them looking inwards. That's why you would have a PMI positive in spite of all of the sanctions and all of the corporates that have left. So they're now producing things like making the lander locally is driving the PMI because it's manufacturing. It's also creating jobs. People who do not have skills will be forced to get skills in that area and then look for how to make bolts, to make the nuts, to put the things together. All that is driving the PMI, and they're able to record a positive. And so while one side is not looking so good, because obviously they're not prepared.
Working on several other sides.
Exactly. And who says in the next 5 years, they might just get that.
And once you've got that, you've got that. Regardless of whatever the situation is elsewhere.
Exactly.
That's
You've
already
got
been
it, you know, and it becomes a strength for you. So you don't have to depend so much on other countries. I think there are so many lessons that we can learn from Russia.
We probably are not learning. Now, the European Union has decided to fully suspend this visa agreement that we were talking about.
I heard you read about Russia saying that they are going to retaliate.
Yes.
Okay, so I mean, the thing is they had a special arrangement that is supposed to make it easy for Russians to apply for EU visa and other. I know we've discussed a whole lot
On that,
about
yes.
some individual countries like Finland,
Yes,
you know,
already reducing.
exactly. So now they're speaking as a bloc, and well, just like what they're doing with the gas, where they say they're doing maintenance. I think that's what the EU is doing. So they're saying we're not banning Russians from applying for
Visas.
We're not. We're just saying there's this special treatment we used to give you guys that is off. So you apply normally and go through
the normal process.
Exactly. And if you get it, you get it. And if you don't get it, you don't get it. So while Russia is maintaining its pipeline, we are also saying, well, you can apply for a visa, but you go through the norm. That's all.
Yes, and the Russians have now also insisted that their own retaliation may not be limited to visas, because when I was reading the story, I heard symmetric, asymmetric, and so
yes.
on. So it's possible that the retaliation may be completely
well,
out
you
of
know,
sync.
by now, I think we've been doing this program since February or March.
Right.
So we do know that Russia, when they want to do
when they're going to react,
yes, they always ensure. I mean, look at you're talking of sanctions on Russia, but we're talking of recession in the UK. We're talking of recession in Germany. Germany is saying, oh, we got the energy, we have gas storage, but you know, there's also cold coming, and price of products have increased because energy prices have gone up. Even the UK that is no longer in the EU. Energy prices have gone up over 300%. Juliana cries every day and says how much she's paying
for it. Indeed.
You know, so I mean, we'll watch and see how Russia will retaliate, but it's not something we're looking forward to, obviously.
At all. Ini, thank you as always.
Thank you
we'll look forward to more of that on Business Morning right after the show, and BizInc at 1:30 later in the day. Thanks. Still to come on the program, a realtor denies renting Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's luxury villa in Tuscany, Italy, to Russians. Stay on with us. Thanks for staying tuned. Welcome back. The president of Germany's network regulator, Klaus Müller, says the country is now better prepared for outages of gas pipelines Nord Stream 1, as its gas storage is nearly 85% filled. According to Mr. Müller, the country will be able to cope with a 3-day gas flow stop via the Nord Stream 1 pipeline if Russia resumes deliveries at the past week's level from Saturday. And that's according to Germany's network regulator. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky has allegedly rented his luxury villa in Tuscany to Russians for the month of August, and that's according to the Italian newspaper Il Tirreno. Meanwhile, Mr. Zelensky himself has called on the EU leaders to deny visas to Russian tourists. According to the newspaper, a Russian couple with a London address had rented the villa for the month of August, paying the princely sum of €50,000. The villa, located in the seaside town of Fort de Marmy, was bought by Mr. Zelensky for €4 million, while the Ukrainian leader was still an actor. Photos posted on social media by the couple confirmed that they were staying in Mr. Zelensky's property. But another Italian newspaper contacted the realtor managing the property, who said that, quote, the tenants weren't Russian, but are likely of Russian origin, but have long since had their residence and perhaps English citizenship. Let's talk now to Olabode Shomi, oil and gas expert, who joins us from our Abuja studios. Good morning, Mr. Shomi. Thank you for your time.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Well, we've been reporting now that it seems as if some of the countries in Europe are more cocky and more cocksure than they were when we last spoke about gas supplies to take them through this winter. Take Germany, for example, now. 85% of its storage full. Some of the other countries, too, are reporting fuller tanks. Are you surprised by this, and are they singing hallelujah too soon?
I think there's nothing like a convincing energy strategy in what has been said. I think a lot of things may at this time just be leadership trying to hype the confidence of the people so as not to send people into a panic. But there's significantly nothing at the moment that shows or that can prove that they have a reason to sing any hallelujah. I mean, it's still autumn. I mean, we're still in summer. Their lights are still on, but the telltale signs are there, and everybody can see and know that these are not the best times for anyone. And I think even the Germans themselves, even the British, know that this is not the best time, because aside from the very fact that energy prices are going high, there's also the issue of availability of energy itself, which the gas is speaking to. Yes, I've heard you speak about the issues about the visas to Europe and all that, but all those pale in comparison to what is happening within Europe itself.
Given that scenario, though, and this rise in prices, the possibility of inflation, and what you had told us when we last spoke to you about the fact that the switch from Russian supplies to any other kind of supplies cannot be done in a hurry. And given what you've just said now about hyping that supply, is there a possibility also that some of the countries, because we're talking about the big countries, Germany, Britain, France, and so on, but the smaller countries, Slovakia, Hungary, and so on, which are more dependent as a function of the percentages of their population vis-a-vis supplies, will not be singing hallelujah at this point because they don't have even the facilities to store this thing during the period that they would require it the most?
Well, I mean, these are realities that we need time to actually test and confirm. I think in a couple of days, the EU energy ministers are meeting, and I think this is going to be the biggest test of EU unity in a very long while. Because primarily, there are people, I mean, just like in Nigeria, one of the reasons why the electricity tariffs cannot just be increased as based on market forces of demand and supply is retaliation from people. So there's the possibility that there could be an uproar in public. So for the people within Europe, particularly the smaller nations that you spoke about, once it gets to winter and there's no energy, I mean, the man on the street really couldn't be bothered about UK and Russia. I mean, apart from what is being said to be national foreign policy. And if his survival, if his livelihood and everything is being triggered by that, they could riot. There could be riots in the street. And when we're talking about riots in the street, you are talking about the possibility of governments being overthrown. At that stage, I mean, it remains what to be seen, because really, I'm not sure that the strategy at any point in time was to get it to this level. Now that it's at this level, we just have to wait and see, because it's not going to be easy for anybody to predict. But the fact remains that the people, especially for the smaller nations, may not have the capacity to go through winter. Winter changes a lot of things in crisis. The World War II was turned around by the winter. And when the Germans attacked, the Nazis attacked Russia, it was turned around in winter. I mean, so many things happen with winter, and particularly with those areas that are close to Russia, they need a lot of energy. So the Scandinavian countries, Finland in particular, shares border with Russia. I remember St. Petersburg used to be, because I've been to St. Petersburg twice, it used to be 15 euro by bus to Helsinki. So they're kind of like close. And if 40% of gas within Finland comes from Russia, and that has been stopped, it remains to see how they will manage the winter. So it's not a funny scenario at all. It's not funny.
The shame of all of this, of course, is that the resource-rich countries which are filling in the gaps, and which one would expect that Nigeria would be one of them, having huge quantities of gas, we cannot contribute to filling this gap because we don't have the facilities for upping our scale. So it's still going back to those who have the facilities. But as I asked you, as you and I discussed the last time, it's a lesson that we need to learn, so that in times of peace, we build these facilities, so that in times of crisis, we can be one of those who are the big players on the field who can step in to fill the gap. Is that still the scenario now? Do you see any evidence that we are taking that lesson?
Well, it remains to be seen. The NMPC, as we know it, they're going through a period of change. And during periods of change, there's first the issue of change and stability. So once they get to stability, we'll now see what they are made of. But the truth be told is that The plan was actually in place from the early days, from the late days of the Obasanjo government, which was what we came known to be the gas master plan. The gap between it is that the gas master plan was not followed consistently by the NNPC themselves. So what we hope is that there will be that anybody who comes in, not just within NNPC, within NUPRC and everybody that's related to the industry, will see governance as a continuum, so that the policies that have been in place by previous government can be followed and such that people can be consistent with it. It is the absence of consistency that is actually the bane of the problem. It is not for lack of policies. It is not for lack of manpower. It is not even really for lack of finances, but the fact that there are too many consistent changes in policies and directions of governance. And when we start to be consistent, I think that is when we will now get to the final line. Because really, for the big projects, there is none of it that can happen within the lifespan of one government. So one government has to do so much and hand over to the next, and not be concerned about the next taking credit. And I think those are the issues we need to learn as a people in times like this.
Well, one can only hope that, again, they are listening as you are saying it now, because we are in the course of starting another transition to a new government, and one can only hope that the necessary lessons are being taken just like some other countries are doing. So, Mr. Labode Showme, thank you so much for your time this morning, for your perspective. Of course, we'll come back to you in the not too distant future, because this issue is not going away, and the bear of winter is fast approaching us. As you said, dramatic things are likely to happen during that period. Thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
And that's where we wrap up the program this morning. Thanks for being with us. My name is Ladi Akeredoluwale. There's an update within the 5 o'clock, The World Today. But until then, to have yourselves a pleasant day ahead.